How's it going, guys? Caleb here with Atasso Outfitters. We've been getting a lot of questions in the last couple of years about our process with how we handle our European mounts when we get a nice buck that we don't think is quite worthy of shoulder mounting. So we really want to just make this video to walk you guys through the process of how we handle them from start to finish, to where you can go from fresh out of the woods to something that looks similar to this, then the final product, just a crystal white, gorgeous European mount that'll look great on your wall. And we did a lot of research in the past as far as different methods and approaches. We've actually tried multiple different methods and approaches, anything from doing beetles to burying the skull underneath a tub for a year to keep varmints away from chewing on the antlers and stuff. And while the beetles and the burying were a great process and we had good results with it, the time aspect took a lot longer. Whereas with this process, we've discovered you can generally get this done, depending on how much time you want to put into it. You can get it done in less than a week. And you can do it yourself right at your house with a few simple tools. So here's one that one of our team members got, really nice Michigan deer. And I'm just gonna kind of dive into the process of how to get started. So let's get after it. Okay, so first things first, to kick things off, these are pretty necessary tools to have to at least get you through the first portion of breaking down the head and getting it to where you then can go on to step number 2 of boiling it. So what we found is really helpful to have throughout this process is a good pair of needle nose pliers, a very sharp knife, which you're going to want to sharpen multiple times with a sharpener, because getting in the bone and the skull as you're cutting the skin back is really going to tend to dull the knife. Also, a couple of sorted picks. If you have some automotive picks, you can pick them up at your local hardware store or your local AutoZone. So let's dive right in. So now that we're ready to go, where I like to start is I like to get in behind under the skin between the ears, because that's where the butcher cut it, so you already have access to the skin. Then I work my way all the way up between the antlers down the nose, and then from there you can go side to side and kind of start by getting the hide off completely. That's step 1. Now, as you can see here, this is where the needle nose pliers really come in handy, because you can use them to grab on and hold the hide as you slice it back with the knife, because doing that with your fingers can just get a little cumbersome. And once you get the hide peeled back, it actually moves pretty quickly. You just grab and pull and then hold your knife like a pencil and just chip away at it. It is a little tedious. This is the trickiest part of the entire process, and the most tedious is just getting all of this cleaned up so that we can get it in the pot to boil it. Alright guys, we've been at it for about, I'd say 50 minutes or so, and once you get the cape off, that's what you should be left with. It's pretty messy. It should end up laying out into 2 pieces, just like I said from the beginning, where you can open it completely up and just kind of take it off. The trickiest part is going to be your jawbone. Now, the reason why the jawbone is difficult is it clamps into the upper jaw here and here by these 2 bones, and it goes up in, and there's tons of muscles in here, to where the easiest way to get it is you use a board for leverage. So like a board to like slowly spread the jaw apart. Then as you spread, you take your knife and you're gonna cut parallel to this, because there's a bunch of muscles and tendons and everything here that is holding those together. And eventually, the more you cut, you'll feel it give. And then you can pry it all the way backwards and it'll completely come off in one full piece here. So you've got the cape and the bottom jaw, toss that in the trash, and then you get to work on the rest of it here when we get ready to boil. Now I did forget to mention that it's good to have a bucket of sorts handy to just put all the nasty stuff you trim off there. Now really all that's left to do between now and getting everything finished is just taking the eyeballs out. You have to cut around them. Those are really tedious to get out. There are tons of little cavities in here that need to be cleaned out, as well as there is a boatload of meat on the back side here. Now from a comparison standpoint with getting it trimmed off, here's where we're at before, and see how all those cavities are cleaned out. Here's the side view where the ear holes are at and where the eye holes are at, and here's the side view of this one. So there is a ton of stuff around where the ear cavities are, and there's a ton of stuff in where the eyeballs are at. The nose, there's a lot of cartilage there that is going to need to be cleaned. Most of that will be taken care of in the boiling process. Make sure you clean up around the bases really good. Those are tricky to get to with the hide there. That's just a pretty tedious process. You stay after it. This is what it should look like pre-boil. This is what it looks like as soon as we get the cape off of it. So we're going to clean it up a little bit more and get really close to tossing it in the pot. Now we're moving on to the step of boiling our skulls. You can get a nice gas burner like this off of Amazon. Usually comes with a pot. Hook it up to your propane, and then the first step is get your water boiling. Now with my water, I always add some Dawn dish soap in there. Add it in after you put the water in. That way it doesn't foam over. But what that does is that's going to help break down some of the grease on the deer skulls. So get that on a nice simmer. Don't go too hot or the soap will bubble and it will boil over and put your flame out. Now once you get your antlers in, the best thing to do is submerge it just below the bases of the antlers. You do not want it to be above, because it can actually make the antler brittle. So the best thing to do is try to position it in a way to where the majority of the skull and the bases, majority of the skull is under the water and the bases are above the water. Now turn the heat up a little bit and let it get to a boil. Now once you get the heat cranked up, you're gonna get to a rolling boil or a simmer. You'll start to see that soap froth up on the top a little bit. And you're gonna wanna keep it in there for a while, because the goal is to cook all of that meat and cook all of the brain out, because the next step is gonna be power washing. Now if you pull it out and you see a lot of that raw meat is actually already cooking and turning that dark grayish brown color, which is a good sign, because that's what we want it to be, so that when we get the power washer out, we'll be able to just rip through it. Alright guys, so I skipped the nasty, gross part because it is just messy and I am soaked. But you get your pressure washer out and then you just hit everything. And honestly, it cleans up really, really well. Now, there are a couple key things here that I wanted to point out to you that are really, really important to get out the brain cavity cleaned out. There's a lot of spots that really need to be hit well. One of which, got to get inside the brain cavity. There is so much tissue down in there that really needs to be cleaned out. Up inside the nose here, there is a ton of nose membrane that needs to be cleaned out. That will stink. And then this is where your pick comes in, because there's going to be a lot of like loose cartilage. You got to come and pick all of this stuff out. Last but not least, the ear pods. So every deer, here's their ear canal. Every deer has these little pods that are attached to their ears. Those will smell. So the best thing to do is you get like a pick in there and you crack those ear pods out. That'll actually give you access to the brain cavity to get the rest of the junk out. Once you're done getting this all cleaned up, we move on to our next step of bleaching everything. Okay guys, so the final step to get the skull as white as can be. Pick up a bottle of Salon Care 40 volume cream. This stuff is incredible and it will turn that skull from more of a beige color to a bright white. Get a paintbrush and some kind of plastic tub. Make sure you're wearing gloves because this stuff will really wreck your hands. Paint it on in coats. Pour some down into the brain cavity. Make sure you're getting every square inch of that skull covered and get it in all the cavities. Because what that's gonna do is it's gonna suck some of the smell and it's gonna clean out a lot of the garbage or anything that might still be in there and dry it up. That way you're not gonna have a stinky skull. Generally, I'll do 24 hours per coat. After 2 or 3 days worth of coats, you should be good to go. Rinse it under hot water, wipe it down, still use gloves because there might be leftover bleach residue. But then dry it off with a blow dryer and you're good to go. So for $4 or $5 from the beauty supply store, this stuff does magic. It's incredible. So any questions, please comment below, shoot it over to us. We'll help anybody walk you through the process. It's super simple and we'll catch you on the next one. See you guys.